Right, I've just kind of set everything up for how I run my cinematic daily fantasy game, and I thought I'll just show you kind of like how I run them. So for I run like a daily game for my grandparents and for a few other groups over over Skype and Zoom and things like that, rather than using Roll20. And I do it in a kind of like theatre of the mind. I would describe it as basically a PowerPoint presentation, but it's kind of like a theatre of the mind, cinematic theatre of the mind. And the way I kind of justify that is if I switch over to what it will look like, it will be like images to reinforce the story that we're telling. So we have like an overview map view, and then let's say we go to a tavern. I'll just have a picture of a tavern. So it's basically like a PowerPoint presentation or some kind of presentation. If they're on a river, they're on a river. If they're at the campfire, we have a campfire. And this is kind of like how I do it. So it's um, definitely kind of like assisted with the images. And like if they're against some enemies, for example, then I'll have like the two pictures of the enemies or the picture of the creature that they're currently fighting up. And this is the view that the person would get, me in the corner, and the background being whatever they're fighting against. I kind of mix in some audio stuff as well. So let me kind of show you my setup. So I've got three monitors that I use to do this, just because I don't like overlapping and I like to be as fluid as I can. So we've got like the main screen is this big screen here, and kind of shows my presentation that I run through. So as you see, when I describe it as a PowerPoint, it is literally it's a Google slide, but it is a presentation software that I use. So I've got all my slides which represent my different scenes, and some of them are reoccurring, so I keep them there. Like, for example, the world map, the campaign map that they kind of follow. And then I'll use the zoom tool to be able to zoom in. And then the only thing that gets broadcast is this window here. So in fact, if I switch back to the screen, and I just kind of reduce the size of that, you'll see it is actually just my presentation, and I just size it to correctly fit into that little viewport that I created. Then just switching back to my main. Then in the middle I've got my broadcasting software. So in this case I've got Skype open, but if I'm using Zoom, if I'm using anything else, Google Meet, whatever, it will be in the middle. And I put my webcam like directly in front of the screen, not on top of the monitor, not below the monitor, but like directly in front of the monitor. So when I'm looking at them, I have like more of a direct eye line with my camera, just to kind of maintain that eye line. And then on the right hand side is a kind of like basically a resources browser. So I'm running through Maze Rats, so I'll have Maze Rats open. I'll have like Google Images. I'm just quickly search for something and copy and paste it into my slide for presenting. And this is just kind of like my window that I use, and it's nice just to have it all open. Then I have another screen which I can't really work out how to capture, which is a bit strange because it's the primary laptop screen, but that just is running OBS. So everything kind of gets blended together through OBS, and then I'll just drag it onto the main screen. But I've got this window here, which is the Teal 3D dice roller, and I can just kind of drag my mouse like this. And what I've done is if I go back to my main screen, I've got that kind of capturing and overlaying on top. So when I want to do dice rolls, it will kind of overlay on top of me. So I like to roll all my dice in the open, and I guess that's like the equivalent of it. I just kind of hide that layer on OBS. And then lastly, I've got my audio stuff, and my audio stuff was a little bit more tricky to set up, because what you can do with OBS is you can use the virtual camera plugin to then take like your production on OBS and make that a virtual camera that then you can use as a webcam in Skype or Meet or whatever you're using, Zoom or whatever. But it doesn't let you do that with audio. There's something to do with some kind of direct show thing, which basically means you can't create like a virtual microphone. So the way I do that is I route all of my audio, like OBS I don't use audio for at all. I route all of my audio through, and I'll just switch over to my audio monitor, through this monitor here. And this is running Voicemeeter, which is free. I'm running the full version, which is called Potato, which just gives you a bit more control over virtual feeds. I've got my microphone coming into this channel here, and I've got my music coming into this middle channel here. So if I play music or some background sounds on YouTube, it should be then sort of passing through into this middle layer, and you can kind of start to pick it up, and that lets me control like the ambient sound with this one here, with this slider here. And then of course I can also do music as well. So I've got the Guild Wars 2 soundtrack in Mix, which is MIXXX, 3 X's, which is like a DJing software, because that lets me load up 2 different tracks, and also I can have a sample bank as well. So if I wanted to add sound effects, I haven't done it yet, but if I wanted to add sound effects into there, I can. So I can kind of play from in here. And then it's all coming into this middle one. So if I reduce that volume there, it lets me control the sound and the sound and the music. And what's really nice about using the Potato is that the individual apps that I'm sending to that channel I can also adjust. So if I wanted to increase the music, like decrease the music, increase the audio, the ambient sound, I can do that as well. So it gives me a few extra controls there. I use Chrome for my 2 main windows, but then I'm using Firefox for my audio window. And the reason for that is that then if you, inside Windows, Windows 10, there's a new feature called the Sound Mixer. And if I load up what that looks like, it basically lets you choose which application where the output of that audio goes to. So this is inbuilt into Windows 10. So by using Firefox as my audio browser, I can then send all of the Firefox to the correct channel inside of Voicemeeter for the audio, and I can like send Skype to various other places. I mean, Skype's got it built in where you can send the audio to different channels, but something like Firefox and browsers don't. So by having Firefox separate to by basically just using a different application, I can send that music to a different audio channel, which gives me volume control. For the purposes of, what this does is then this gives you this Voicemeeter Potato, then gives me a separate, like a virtual microphone that then I can plug that into Skype. So if I go over to settings in my Skype, and this is similar for most of them, and go to audio visual, you can see I can pick my camera as my OBS camera, which is currently off. I've turned my virtual camera off for the case of this video, and then my microphone being the Voicemeeter output, which you can see because I forgot to flip over the camera. Okay, that's fine. And that's really it. That's kind of like how I do my productions, and it will look like kind of like going through. So this is the village that they went to, and it's a really quick way of me very visually building up something for my group. That, you know, I do this particularly with my grandparents, and they're very passive in their technology, so I need to kind of like produce something for them. So something like Roll20 isn't appropriate for them because I can't get them to log in and move characters around and build maps and things, whereas this is just very nice because it's very it's more theatre. It's like you get the benefit and the speed of theatre of the mind, but then you get the kind of visual clarity or the enhancement that imagery will give you. Particularly because my grandparents, this is the first time they've ever played like a role-playing game before, and my grandmother didn't know what an orc was, and that's really difficult to explain. So I just kind of like showed a picture of these. This is the 2 enemies. This is what they look like. So that's what I do, and that's how I run my game. So if you want me to kind of go through anything in more detail, or maybe do a tutorial setup, then happy to do that.